and I've never forgotten that. He was trying to win a boxing match. I was trying to kill that guy.
He preached forgiveness, but never practiced it. George Foreman, boxing's born-again powerhouse, built his second life on faith. Yet some names still poisoned his prayers. Behind the pulpit, the preacher still fought old wars. And when he finally confessed who he could never forgive, the halo cracked. Every rivalry has a starting point, and for George Foreman, it wasn't a single fight. It was something built into him long before the world knew his name. To see why he fought the way he did, we have to rewind to where it all began. Roots of Foreman's fighter attitude. What kind of man turns raw anger into power? For George Foreman, that story begins in Houston's 5th Ward, a neighborhood known for hard living and even harder lessons. He grew up as one of 7 kids, raised by a mother who worked herself to the bone to keep food on the table. Every day was a test of endurance. Poverty literally surrounded him, and danger was never far. In that kind of place, you either toughened up or got swallowed by it. Now this is where Foreman's fight first took shape. By the age of 15, school had lost its meaning. Foreman literally dropped out of school and drifted into street fights and petty troubles. It's not like he was evil. George Foreman was just angry at a world that seemed rigged against him. Then one night, everything shifted. A television advertisement flickered across the screen, showing Jim Brown and Johnny Unitas talking about a government program called the Job Corps. For the first time, Foreman saw something that looked like a way out. He convinced his mother to let him go, and at 16, he left Houston behind. In the Job Corps, he found something he'd never had before, which was structure. The program taught trades like bricklaying and carpentry, but more importantly, it taught him discipline. For the first time, people around him expected more than trouble. But what really changed his life was meeting Doc Broadus. Broadus was a trainer who saw potential where others saw trouble. He recognized that Foreman's anger could either destroy him or drive him. Because of this, Broadus handed him a pair of gloves and told him to prove himself in the ring instead of the streets. It was the kind of challenge Foreman needed, and this particular challenge would define him for life. Once he started boxing, the ring became Foreman's new world. He earned his GED there, learned respect, and turned his anger into focus. Every punch was a statement, and each match was proof that he was no longer that boy from the streets. The sound of the crowd replaced the chaos of the neighborhood. Boxing became his redemption. And with time, George Foreman's power became legendary. His punching style was simple, yet unique. He hit hard, hit fast, and made opponents fear him. He racked up 76 wins, with 68 of them being just knockouts. When he stepped into the ring, it wasn't just a fight. It was a test of who he was. Strength meant respect, and respect meant survival. Anything less wasn't an option. Still, his past never really left him. Foreman couldn't stand opponents who ran around the ring instead of standing toe-to-toe. He had no tolerance for arrogance or showboating. To Foreman, those weren't tactics, they were insults. Coming from where he did, every fight meant proving he belonged. When someone made him feel disrespected, it wasn't about boxing anymore. It was personal. Years later, fans would see him smile on television, selling grills and preaching about faith. They saw a calm, thoughtful man who talked about forgiveness and redemption. That image was real, but it wasn't the full story. The man who stood before cameras with that famous grin was the same one who had once fought through hunger, violence, and humiliation. Behind that calm voice was someone who had spent his life battling both opponents and memories. Over nearly 3 decades, Foreman faced the best of his generation and the next. He fought legends, contenders, and pretenders. Some earned his respect, others earned his silence. There were rivalries that ended in laughter and handshakes, and others that left scars no title could erase. Certain boxers had a way of getting under his skin, sometimes with their words, other times with their style. Those grudges didn't fade easily. And so, when Foreman finally named the fighters he truly hated, it felt like history coming back with full force. The question is, who were those men that stirred something that deep inside him? And what did they do to earn a place on that list? Joe Frazier was basically Smokin' Joe, the popular, relentless warrior with a left hook that could end a man's night in seconds. He had fought his way to the top with grit, fire, and a kind of determination that never blinked. He was the heavyweight champion of the world, the man who had beaten Muhammad Ali when no one thought it was possible. Facing Frazier meant facing the heartbeat of boxing itself. When George Foreman stepped into the ring with Frazier on January 22, 1973, the world held its breath. The fight was billed as the Sunshine Showdown, taking place in Kingston, Jamaica, under the bright Caribbean sky. It was not only a title match, but also a clash between two undefeated titans. Frazier was 29-0, with 10 title defenses under his belt, and Foreman was 37-0, with a terrifying knockout streak. These two men, who had never been beaten, were now staring each other down for the crown. From the opening bell, something felt different. Frazier came forward, bobbing and weaving in his familiar rhythm, but Foreman didn't retreat. He stood his ground, throwing punches that sounded like thunder. Each shot landed with a weight that shook the crowd into silence. In the first round alone, Foreman dropped Frazier 3 times. Frazier kept getting up, defiant, shaking his head as if daring Foreman to do it again, and he did. By the start of the second round, Frazier's legs were heavy. Foreman, calm and precise, saw his chance. A crushing right hand sent Frazier sprawling. Another barrage of hooks, uppercuts, and shots followed, and each one seemed to take a little more out of the champion. 6 times Frazier went down, and 6 times he rose, only for the referee to finally wave it off. At 1 minute and 35 seconds into round 2, it was over. George Foreman was the new heavyweight champion of the world. For Foreman, that moment was everything he had fought for, yet it carried a strange kind of silence. Beating Joe Frazier that brutally didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like the end of something sacred. Frazier had been the man everyone respected because he was a symbol of courage, the kind of fighter fans adored even in defeat. To dismantle that image so completely was both a victory and a burden. It was as if Foreman had broken a myth and wasn't sure how the world would see him afterward. Years later, Foreman would look back and admit that the fight haunted him in ways few understood. He spoke with respect about Frazier's toughness, about how the man kept rising when any other fighter would have stayed down. "I remember Joe Frazier. He was the toughest I had ever seen. I kept thinking, I want to be the champion of the world, but I sure hope Joe Frazier dies. I knew if you hit him, Frazier, he liked it," Foreman said. He knew he had crushed a legend that night, and part of him seemed to wrestle with that. Still, there was another layer to this whole saga. It felt like fans loved the man who refused to quit more than the man who delivered the beating. And in Foreman's eyes, power was his gift, yet it made people fear him more than love him. That tension between respect and rivalry defined their story. For Foreman, defeating Frazier was both a triumph and a mirror reflecting back everything he'd gained and everything he couldn't control about how the world saw him. For Frazier, it was a loss that hurt his pride, but never dimmed his fire. For the rest of boxing, it was the night they witnessed power on a scale they had never seen before. The next rival would bring its own fire, but none would ever sting quite like the man who floated, stung, and smiled while doing it. Muhammad Ali was more than a boxer. He was a storm wrapped in words and gloves. Ali was literally a man who could light up a room before he ever threw a punch. Born Cassius Clay in Louisville, Kentucky, he carried himself like he was born for greatness. He had hands, a faster mouth, and a kind of confidence that made people listen. To many, he wasn't just fighting opponents. He was fighting the limits placed on him by the world. By 1974, he had lived a full career of triumphs and trials. He had been stripped of his title for refusing the draft, stood his ground on principle, and came back to reclaim respect with wins over Joe Frazier and Ken Norton. Ali wasn't simply a fighter anymore. He was a symbol of defiance and grace under pressure, of a belief that charisma could be its own weapon. But all of that would be tested in Zaire, where the world's most feared puncher was waiting for him. They called it the Rumble in the Jungle on October 30th, 1974, in Kinshasa. George Foreman walked into the ring undefeated, younger, and built like a tank. He had just knocked out Joe Frazier in 2 rounds and destroyed Ken Norton in 1. Ali, at 32, was considered past his prime, and most experts predicted he wouldn't last long. The heat was thick, the crowd electric, and every camera lens pointed toward a fight that felt larger than life. From the opening bell, Foreman unleashed thunder. His punches came heavy, designed to end things fast. Every swing rattled through the ring. Ali, though, didn't meet him head-on. Instead, he leaned against the ropes, absorbing shots, covering up, and typically shouted words that would echo through boxing history. "Come on, George, show me something. Is that all you got?" The crowd roared, confused and thrilled. Ali was doing something no one expected. He was letting the storm pass. What the world didn't know was that Ali had a plan. He called it the rope-a-dope. He let Foreman burn energy while he waited, calm under fire. As each round went by, Foreman's rhythm slowed. His power, once unstoppable, began to fade under the African sun. By the 7th round, the champion's punches were coming slower, heavier, and more desperate. Then, in the 8th round, Ali got the moment he had been waiting for. With a sudden speed, Muhammad Ali stepped forward and unleashed a blur of punches. A left, a right, and another right, and immediately Foreman went down. The crowd exploded, and the referee counted to 10. The giant who had looked unbeatable was lying flat on the canvas. Muhammad Ali, against all odds, was the heavyweight champion of the world again. Foreman later called it one of the most humiliating nights of his life. He said it felt like being mugged in the jungle. He went to Africa with 2 belts and came home with none. What stung more than the loss was how it happened. He hadn't been beaten by strength, but by strategy. Ali didn't overpower him. He had outsmarted him. For a man like Foreman, built on dominance and intimidation, this kind of defeat cut deep. Years later, Foreman would admit that Ali had his number. Ali knew exactly how to frustrate him, how to make him fight the wrong fight. It wasn't only his body that broke that night, it was his confidence. To have the world watch him crumble at the hands of a man who taunted and smiled through every round left a mark that never fully faded. What made it worse was how the world reacted. Ali's victory wasn't just celebrated, it was glorified. He was hailed once more as the greatest, while Foreman became the silent figure in the background of another man's legend. The fight became Ali's story, not his. For a proud champion, that shadow was hard to live under. Foreman once called the defeat the most embarrassing moment of his career. Still, time did something strange and softened the edges. In later years, he spoke with warmth about Ali. The 2 men, once fierce rivals, shared phone calls, laughter, and eventually faith. Foreman even said that if a man could beat him like Ali did, then that man was worth being friends with. The bitterness stayed, but softened by time and shared history. So perhaps hate is too blunt a word for what Foreman felt toward Ali. It may have been resentment, humiliation, envy, and an understanding that Ali had tapped into something Foreman couldn't control. Respect mixed with wounded pride, the kind of complex feeling that is more interesting than pure villainy. In naming Ali among the fighters who couldn't stand fully, Foreman forced us to see their rivalry not just as sport, but as a collision of identities, power, and memory. And after all, when the names came out, Ali's would always be the hardest to unpack, because that fight in the jungle wasn't a simple loss. It was a fracture in the legend of Big George, and that fracture would echo in every other grudge he named. Sometimes, the toughest rivalries aren't born from hate, but from the pressure to prove something bigger than pride. And for George Foreman, the next name on his path was one that tested both his power and his patience. Ken Norton carried an aura that few fighters could match. He wasn't the kind of boxer who needed to talk tough to prove himself because his record spoke loud enough for him. He was the Black Hercules, a man who once broke Muhammad Ali's jaw, earning a reputation as one of the few who could hurt greatness itself. So when George Foreman faced him in Caracas, Venezuela in 1974, the stakes felt personal in a way that words couldn't capture. The Poliedro de Caracas was buzzing that night. Foreman walked in as the heavy favorite, the undefeated wrecking force who had crushed Joe Frazier not long before. Norton, though, wasn't someone to overlook. He had already gone toe-to-toe with Ali twice and left both a physical and psychological mark on him. This alone made him dangerous to someone like Foreman. The opening round felt cautious, almost like both men were sizing up a storm they knew was coming. Norton used his jab, moving with precision. Foreman stalked, studying, waiting for an opening. The respect between them was clear, but so was the tension. Then, in round 2, Foreman changed everything. His pace quickened, his punches landed heavier, and suddenly, Norton was caught in a storm he couldn't control. A right hand rocked Norton, and before he could recover, more came, and each one landed with terrifying force. Norton hit the canvas. He stood up, tried to regroup, but Foreman didn't let up. After the third round, the referee stepped in. It was over in less than 6 minutes. The man who once broke Ali's jaw was now sprawled across the ring, unable to withstand Foreman's power. People were stunned because Norton wasn't an easy man to break. And yet, that night, he looked helpless. The combination of power and precision from Foreman made it feel like Norton had stepped into something unstoppable. And though the fight ended quickly, its meaning lingered much longer. This wasn't a grudge match in the typical sense. There was no shouting, no name-calling. Still, something deeper ran between them. There was a quiet rivalry built on pride and perception. Before the fight, Norton commented on Foreman's style, calling him like a Mack truck and saying he was more physical than Ali. Foreman replied with confidence, saying Norton didn't know what he was going to face and that when he got into the ring, there wouldn't be time to think. Those are strong words of challenge. After the fight, Foreman didn't gloat. He simply said, "He moved away from me in the ring, and I threw a real wide right hand, and I caught him on the end of it, and those punches really hurt, and he never did recover from that." The words were simple, but their meaning was sharp. Beating a man who had earned all's respect wasn't just another win, it was a statement. Also, Ali apparently asked Foreman to fight Norton for him at one point. And this gave the public a narrative that Foreman versus Norton was not only a fight, but part of broader rivalries. Lastly, we'll move to a name that Foreman once refused to fight, and that refusal reveals another shade of his grudges. Tony Tucker's name drifts through George Foreman's story like a shadow that was never even seen. He wasn't a man Foreman defeated, nor one he traded punches with under bright lights. He was the fighter Foreman refused to face. After reclaiming the heavyweight title in 1994 with that thunderous knockout of Michael Moorer, Foreman stood once again at the top of the boxing world. The WBA ordered him to defend the belt against Tony Tucker, a powerful, unpredictable contender. However, what George Foreman did stunned everyone. He didn't argue or say anything. He just quietly gave up the title instead. At the time, fans were shocked. Normally, Champions are supposed to defend their crowns, to fight anyone who dares step forward, right? But Foreman walked away. When asked about it years later during an interview at Oxford, he gave a short, unshaken answer. "Some people I'm not going to fight. That's the good reason. I didn't want to fight him. Too tough." There was no bravado or no attempt to justify. It was only a rare admission that spoke volumes without explaining much. What made those words so unforgettable wasn't what he said, but what they implied. Calling a man too tough can mean many things. It can mean respect. It can mean fear. It can even mean both. Foreman, who had knocked down Joe Frazier 6 times and faced Ali under Forza, the hot Zaire sky, wasn't known for backing away. Yet here he was, choosing silence over a challenge. Walking away from the ring was itself an answer. Tony Tucker was no pushover. He had quick hands, a long reach, and an ability to frustrate even the best. He'd gone the distance with champions, and more importantly, he carried an aura that made others second-guess themselves. Maybe that was what unsettled Foreman, the thought of facing a man he couldn't read. Or maybe it wasn't fear at all, but calculation, the wisdom of a veteran who'd learned to pick his battles carefully. Whatever the reason, Tucker became a name Foreman never crossed paths with, a name that hovered around his legacy like an unanswered question. Meanwhile, this refusal changed something about how people viewed Foreman. It showed that even the toughest fighters have invisible lines they won't cross, and sometimes the opponents they avoid say more about them than the ones they defeat. In a sport built on pride and power, admitting that someone might be too tough is almost unheard of. In walking away, he revealed something about himself that no knockout could ever show. Every fighter has a name that lingers, a ghost that never left the ring. And for George Foreman, that ghost's name was Tony Tucker. Do you think George Foreman walked away from Tony Tucker out of wisdom or out of fear? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.